Hi everyone, the new unit of work that we're looking at is called Food Equity, and we'll be discussing who has access to food and who doesn't right throughout the world. So what we're going to have a look at for this lesson is the definitions of food equity, and we're going to have a look at the reasons that people are living in poverty without enough food to eat. What I want you to do is to start a glossary within your OneNote or wherever you're keeping your notes for this unit of work, and you might want to pause and just make a note of these glossary terms. As these come up within the presentation, I want you to add in your definitions for these glossary terms. So food equity refers to the equal access and availability of food. If everyone in the world had equal access to food and nobody was hungry, we would say that we had global food equity. That word inequity, so by putting an in at the front of equity, actually tells us that there isn't an equal access to food across the world, and you'll see why in a minute. The World Food Summit of '96 actually had a definition for food security, and they said that when all people at all times have got sufficient, so that's enough, safe and nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active lifestyle, it would be said that they were food secure. So we don't actually have food security in the world, and you'll see why. So make sure that you put down some definitions. We're just going to have a look at where most of the hungry people are. Now, the Food and Agricultural Organisation, this is their latest statistics from last year. And if you have a look at the little picture that you've got there, you'll see that the whole picture is representing 842 million people, and that's everyone in the world who's hungry. But 98% of them are actually in developing countries, and we'll have a look at the difference between developed and developing countries in a minute. But just have a look at where most of the hungry people are. You've got Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the developed countries are only that very, very, very small section over here where we have 16 million people who are hungry. We're looking at the difference between developed and developing countries. Now, you would have covered this in geography last year, and you would have some idea through other subjects that you've done. But a developed country has a highly developed economy, so that relates to money. They've got plenty of technology, high standards of living, plenty of healthcare, and everybody is educated there. So make sure that you just pause now and put your definition down for a developed country, and you might also want to put some examples down as well. A developing country is a nation with a lower standard of living. They don't have as much economic stability, and there's also generally a lower level of education, healthcare and income, and people aren't living as long either. So have a look at the map there, and you'll see that the advanced economies, we're very lucky we're actually living in one, and then also over here in North America, very advanced economies, and then these parts here of Europe. If you have a look, the least developed countries are through Africa, and we know a lot of poor people live through Africa, and also down through here a little bit through Asia. But if you look at that orange, that's also the less developed countries. So anyone we're talking about, people who are poorer and don't have a great access to food, it actually is in this this part of the world that's more that orange section. There are many reasons why people don't have an equal access to food. We're going to have a look at the 5 main reasons. So we've got lack of safe water, scarcity of food, so that's not enough food, poverty, a lack of knowledge of nutritional needs, and distribution issues. So you're going to be making some points along the way under each of those points. So you might want to get down those headings now and then fill in your summaries as we go along. The first aspect of food equity that we're going to be having a look at is the lack of safe water. Now, you would have covered water in geography, so what I've done on the left is just reviewed some of the important facts about water, and then on the right you have a picture which shows people's access to fresh water, so that's water that you could actually drink. So the darker the blue means that the more water that you have. So if you look in Australia, we're actually quite lucky to have plenty of water, but and the lighter you go, it shows you that there is a lack of fresh water, drinking water, and you can see that mostly up through Asia around here and through Africa, they don't actually have access to fresh drinking water. So pause and have a look at the statistics over here on the left hand side, just to review your work from last year. So I've included another map here. This one actually shows you the percentage of the population in those countries who have access to safe drinking water. So again, the bluer areas show you that over 85% of the people can have access to safe drinking water, which you can see, luckily Australia is in that. And then the colours which are pink right down to red actually show you the percentages who don't have access to fresh water. So again, it's right through those regions of Africa and a little bit up through Asia as well. Okay, what I have clipped in here is some statistics from water.org, which is a great resource if you want to have a look at safe drinking water and just the availability of water around the world. So I'm going to leave that for you to read, but what I found quite astounding is that diarrhea is actually the second leading cause of death in children under 5 around the world. So diarrhea occurs because you don't have access to safe drinking water. The water that they are drinking actually contains lots of bugs. It happens a lot for children under 5, a lot for people under 1 actually, because when they're drinking formula, they're actually having the baby formula mixed in with water that's unsafe to drink. So just pause now, have a look. You might like to write down some of the statistics. Another important issue is that women and children are mostly responsible for actually collecting water. So you'll find that a lot of women and children are out collecting water rather than being educated in schools. The second reason we're looking at why people don't have enough food is just due to food scarcity. So food scarcity is when there is just not enough food to eat. In some areas of the world, there's not a lot of vegetation. You can imagine in desert areas, they're not actually growing a lot of food, so then they don't have food for animals to eat. Also, when there's not enough transport, food actually can't get to people. Again, I found some recent statistics. These are from the World Food Programme website, so wfp.org. There is lots of information on here to help you further understand why there's not enough food in the world. So have a look at what these statistics are telling you. There's about 842 million people who don't have enough food to be healthy. We've had a look at that before. But it's actually fallen since 1990 by 17%, so that's actually a really good thing. Most of the undernourished people are still in Southern Asia, and then you've got Africa, so we saw that again on your map before. But then a third of all deaths in children under 5 are actually linked to them not having enough food to eat, so that food scarcity. The third reason that there's not enough food in the world is actually due to poverty. People just actually don't have enough money to buy enough food. So that lack of income can be caused by geographical isolation, which means they're very far away from where the jobs are. High unemployment levels, also low income, so not enough money to buy food, or just that inability to actually get a job. An important thing in developing countries is that they often have a lot of natural disasters which happen there, so floods or droughts. That also pushes up the prices of food, and then people who don't have enough money just actually can't afford to buy food. Most of the hungry people we've discussed are living in developing countries, and then that's 14.3% of the population is undernourished. So you can see in that little table down the bottom that hunger's killing more people every year than AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis all combined, so they're quite terrible diseases. The fourth reason that people aren't getting enough food is as they just don't know about nutrition. So a lot of the time people are getting sick and dying because they don't know that they should be eating fruit and vegetables to get their vitamins and minerals. So they might be living on a diet that's very bland in carbohydrates like rice, and they're not actually getting the nutrients to keep them healthy. In developing countries, undernutrition of most of those food groups which you know about is very common. So when they're not getting enough nutrition, 1 in 4 children ends up being stunted, which means that they physically and mentally aren't growing. And the other statistic you have there, that the first 1,000 days of a child's life, so that's from pregnancy through to the age of 2, are very critical. And if children aren't getting enough nutrition then from fruits and vegetables, then that's when they're actually getting that mental and physical growth stunting. Also, we found out there that 1 out of 6 children, which is roughly 100 million people in developing countries, are underweight. So those statistics are really up to date. They're from this year, from the World Food Programme. The final reason that we're going to have a look at why people are hungry is related to distribution. So how are they actually getting food? So we know there's enough food produced in the world to feed everyone, but it can't always get to people. And the reasons that it can't get to people is because transport is actually really expensive. So in poorer countries, they just don't have the money to transport the food. Also, remote areas, and that's not just in developing countries, but if you have a think about Australia, remote areas right out in the bush, they actually don't have roads, rail or vehicles that can transport the food. Sometimes people have got to travel for a day or so to get to anywhere where they can buy food. The storage of food can be inadequate too. If you're thinking about shipping fresh fruit and vegetables on a truck out to the middle of Australia, you could be looking at a couple of days before people are actually getting access to that. And if you don't have adequate cold storage, then fruit and vegetables can go off. Also, perishable foods, if you think about refrigerated foods like milk and all your dairy products, they actually don't travel very well when they're not in refrigerated vehicles. So that Australia is very small, but if you start thinking about those other developing countries, there is also like a massive area to cover. So that's the end of our presentation for today, and it's just finding out the reasons why there is not enough food to eat in the world. These are some things I want you to have a think about for your lesson, but also just on a day-to-day basis. That access to safe water is a huge thing. We're very lucky we can just turn on a tap and we have safe water. But what would it be like if you actually had to go out and get your water? You couldn't just turn on a tap to get a drink. Also have a think about what it'd be like to not have enough food, where you couldn't just go and open your pantry and find something to eat. We think it's bad enough when we open the fridge and there's nothing in there that we actually feel like eating. But imagine, well, you didn't have a fridge, or you didn't even have storage of food. You just had to go out and get your own food every day. So this whole unit of work is about you having a think about what can you actually do to ensure that other people in the world are getting enough food. And it's a massive problem, but some things that you could do right now. There is a quiz on the World Food Programme page. Every quiz that you do, so you can go through, do your quiz about hunger, and then what happens is World Food Programme actually donate a meal to someone in a developing country. The other thing that we can do is there is a hashtag meal for a meal, which Oz Harvest and I think it's Virgin Mobile are actually joining up together. And what you can do with your Instagram photos is hashtag meal for a meal, and every time that's hashtag Virgin, actually donate money to Oz Harvest. And Oz Harvest are a group, and they actually are located in Newcastle as well, who go around to big businesses, collect their waste food, and then they actually make up meals for people and take them to poor people. So that's a very local thing that we can do. So all of our pictures for our Instagram account, I want you to hashtag them meal for a meal so that Virgin actually donate money to Oz Harvest. Okay, that's it for today. What you should have done is made some notes on everything. I want you to have entered in your glossary terms, and when you come into class next, we'll be discussing these issues in more detail.